How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado. And today I've got a bit of a fun one. Taking some feedback from clients and people who have moved here to Denver and what I'm learning from them. And that is things that everybody learns after they move to Denver, Colorado. Let's dig into it. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. And listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons to moving to or living around Denver, Colorado, then this is a channel for you. So especially if this is your first time visiting the channel, make sure to click that subscribe button and notification icon that are popping up on your screen as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And listen, as much as I love trying to be entertaining here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado, and I'm teamed with some of Denver and the state's most talented realtors. We're helping people move here each and every day, so that number and email popping up on your screen, I'm always there to be a resource for you, be it a call, a text, an email, always the person answering those phone calls and those questions, there when and if you need me. Now that we have that fun-filled stuff out of the way, let's get to what we're here for, and that is, what are the things that everybody learns after they move to Denver? All right, so let's understand up front, this video is not about these big mistakes that people make moving here. I got another video for that if you want to check that out. This is all about things that friends and clients, feedback that I've gotten from people moving here where they say, you know, I thought about this, I did some research on this, but I just didn't realize, wow, what this was like, or how this would be once we got here and once we got involved in the community. So the first one, and probably my favorite, is the fact that Denver has become quite the melting pot of diversity, culture, different ethnicities, a lot of people moving here. Now, let me be very, very clear. I'm not going to compare Denver to major cities like Miami, New York, Chicago, LA, Houston. There are plenty of communities in which the diversity is much greater than it is in Denver. But when I look at Denver and when I talk to people who have recently moved here, you're seeing more of that melting pot effect. You're seeing a lot of different cultures, races, religions, a lot of different people coming to Denver and exploring it. Denver has always had a pretty large Caucasian and Latino community in it, but that just continues to be enhanced with more and more different cultures and races. I was asked recently, in fact, by someone who was considering moving to Denver, did I think that this was a safe place? And obviously I'm one person's perspective, but did I feel that, as an example, biracial relationships were healthy here? And was it a safe place to raise biracial children? And it was actually an interesting timing for the question. I myself am getting ready to become married in a biracial relationship. My oldest niece going to be married next year in a biracial relationship, and having those conversations and seeing that Denver, in my humble opinion, as one man and based on conversations with my friends, is a great city that I am excited to raise a future biracial child in. And seeing that melting pot effect, that's been one of my favorite pieces of feedback I have gotten from people. Do we have a long ways to go? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But we're getting there. So the second big lesson that people learn as they arrive in Denver is that Denver just keeps going. And let me elaborate on that. So when I was a kid, if you left Denver to go to, say, Pueblo, which is one of the, for Colorado, bigger cities of Denver, and it's where my mother is from, it was and is about a 2 to 2.5 hour drive south of Denver. So if you left Denver, you were gonna hit Castle Rock, which was this little teeny blip. And yes, I didn't grow up that long ago, it wasn't horse and buggies, but you had your little Castle Rock, and then you hit Colorado Springs, about an hour and a half-ish south of Denver, and Colorado Springs had some decent size to it, but it wasn't anything major. And then you got to Pueblo, but that was it. There was nothing really in between there. Denver to Castle Rock, Colorado Springs, Pueblo. Now, as you make that drive, there's certainly some open strips and some beautiful land to look at, but you have Castle Rock has expanded. It's a lot bigger. So Castle Rock now, parts of it, I mean, almost stretch all the way up to Denver and where the Denver Tech Center and Centennial are. It all kind of blends together. As you get south of Castle Rock, you get to areas like Castle Pines, you get to Monument, everything kind of bleeds in. You get even farther south, you get to Fountain. But you have all these communities on your way down to Pueblo. And so what you've now seen is that people will live down in Castle Rock and Monument and Castle Pines. Hell, they'll get close to Colorado Springs, but still work at times in Denver. So the city itself, it's not just people living in Denver or right in the suburbs. Going up north, same exact thing. Used to be from Denver, you either went basically to Boulder or you went up to Fort Collins. Boulder being a little northwest of Denver, and then Fort Collins being, pretty straight north. And there was nothing in between. Now on your way to Boulder, you're hitting towns, you're hitting Broomfield, which is expanded and one of the most popular areas you can live in Colorado. You got towns like Erie and Louisville. Then when you go up to Fort Collins, you're hitting towns like Larkspur, you're hitting Berthoud. And see, I already screwed up my geography. You hit Longmont. Larkspur is south, Longmont is north, Long. You can see how I get confused, but you hit Longmont. So there are all these different towns and all these different communities that you're hitting any direction of Denver. Obviously going west, you run into the mountains, and going east, Aurora just tends to run forever. But Denver really spreads out, and you'll have people that will live in these communities up to an hour and a half away from Denver, hour and a half being extreme, but still working, at least to some extent, in Denver. So it's not one of those cities where you're necessarily right in the heart of it. A lot of people are, don't get me wrong, but it's not the case for everybody. It is a very large city, and as far as the communities that encompass it, they're really spread out. I feel like I'm extremely long-winded in this video. I might have my editor just kind of speed up so I sound more like a chipmunk. I kid, let's not do that. So lesson number 3, and I'm learning it right now. It's dry out here, okay? You gotta drink a lot of water. You gotta carry your chapstick. You gotta throw on sunscreen. There's a reason it's summertime and I'm inside. It is freaking hot. And because it's so dry, like you sweat, but you don't sweat. It kind of dries up into your body so you don't realize how dehydrated you are. And then all of a sudden, like you have no saliva in your mouth because it's dry. And then especially in the wintertime for me, my hands start to get dry and crack, or my lips. I never carry chapstick. I'm a dude. We're terrible at chapstick and with lotion. But those things happen. So, I mean, it is dry. We talk about this, Denver being a high plains desert. You don't really think about it until it hits you. So just have it in your mind. Water, chapstick, sunscreen, altitude. People will get here and they know, they've heard, oh, it's 5,280 feet, it's a mile up. Then they go into the mountains and they have 2 beers and they don't know why they feel a little messed up after 2 beers. They don't know why they take a pretty subtle hike. And yes, they've heard altitude, but man, they get up there and they're like, it happens. So those effects, how dry it is and the altitude, it takes a minute to get used to. And even though people have it in their mind, they think they know, they get here and it creeps up on them. Which leads directly into my 4th point. We've talked in the past about how people in Colorado, they like to be outdoorsy, they like to get out and about and do things. Well, the perhaps sometimes most creative or least creative outdoor thing that people like to do in Colorado is they like to go hiking. So what surprises a lot of my clients is how often they randomly get invited to go on hikes, and especially 14ers. I don't know what it is. I know Colorado has more 14ers than anywhere else, and we just love them. And by 14, I mean mountains that are 14,000 feet in altitude at the peak, but just people love them. It's just a thing. And you've got these folks that just can't help themselves. They need to climb as many 14ers as they can, and they need to have the picture on Instagram of them holding the card that says the mountain's, altitude. And I respect it. So be prepared for a lot of people to ask you to go hiking, which could then affect you when it comes to the altitude. But here is my pro tip when it comes to 14ers, and I've seen a lot of people screw this up. It takes a while. 14,000 feet, I don't care where you're starting from, to get to that summit, it takes time. So you're gonna wanna start early in the day. One of the things that people don't realize, especially if they have not climbed in any way or hiked at altitude, is even when the weather is pretty warm, relatively speaking, you get up to 12, 13, 14,000 feet, it gets cold real quick. You need to make sure you're prepared. That goes back to the water and chapstick and sunscreen. But start early, hit that peak, and I'm gonna tell you right now, sunrise 14ers, it's probably the one time you'll really get me to climb them. Fantastico. The fifth thing people were surprised by, but I'm gonna say that this really depends on where they came from, is how early restaurants in Denver can close. Bars close at 2. We know that, and there are some bars with restaurants where they'll serve food until midnight. That's about it. So I get a lot of feedback from people coming from big cities. Your Miami's, Chicago's, New York's, what have you. Especially people who might be used to going to dinner. It's not unusual for them to go to dinner at 8:30, 9:30 at night. That doesn't really roll in Denver. Most of our restaurants are gonna close at 10. You might find some that would close at 10:30, 11, but most of your big name, nice restaurants, they're gonna close at 10. We are not doing 9:30 dinner here unless we are at a bar that happens to serve food as well. I have plenty of people coming from rural areas or Midwest or what have you. Not that Midwest is all rural, I lived there for a while, but they don't seem to care because they eat at 7 o'clock, like we're supposed to. I kid, I don't know what your sleeping habits are, but man, I can't eat at 9 o'clock anymore. I'd be up all night with agita. Number 6, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, and I'm probably gonna get some heat if anybody local watches this video, but our sports knowledge in Denver is slipping. Okay, there was a time as a child, if I went to a Bronco game and I listened to Bronco fans, as an example, they tended to know a lot about football. They knew about the other team. They were realistic. Very rarely did they start yelling stuff that didn't make any sense. And nowadays you go to a game, and I think it's a little better in hockey. Our hockey fans seem to have some pretty good knowledge. But in the other sports, and especially our Bronco fans, were slipping. Our level of knowledge, our fans will get rowdy and make a lot of noise when our team's on offense. I got a guy behind me that randomly tells them that they should punt on 3rd down. I don't know what's happening. So just be prepared. If you're a big sports fan, you're coming to Denver, you might hear some people say some really pointless, goofy stuff that doesn't make any sense. Just kind of tune it out and understand it's probably the altitude. They probably have some altitude sickness. The couple beers are getting to them. They're just not making any sense. And the number 7 thing that people learn once they get here, and I'm gonna admit they should probably know this ahead of time, but it's hard, and that is things aren't cheap here. We'll start with housing, whether you're buying a place or renting a place. Denver is no longer a very affordable place to live. And I could say that is again going to be based on where you're coming from. But for the majority of the US, or the world for that matter, because we talked about us becoming more diverse, Denver housing is expensive. Rentals are expensive. Housing in general is on a shortage here in Denver, so landlords are jacking those rents up. It's also not a cheap city to go out in anymore. There was a time where you could go out in Denver, especially on a Tuesday and Thursday, you'd be surrounded by like $2 you call it's and 2-for-1 specials, and you could go out for $40 and have yourself a hell of a night. Now, I mean, you're probably dropping a bill, and that's not including the Uber ride downtown or getting gas if you're not drinking. Okay? Keep that in mind. But I mean, at bars, at restaurants, food isn't cheap, drinks aren't cheap. You're gonna go to a lot of places now where, beers are $8, $9, your cocktails are $12, $13, $14. It's a little wild to say that out loud, and I know that is somewhat normal in bigger cities, but to say it in Denver, where it feels like 4 years ago you could get a Coors Light for $2.50 no matter where you went, unless you were at a sporting event. But Denver has gotten pricey. You gotta be ready to drop some coin if you're coming here. Now, I know you're probably thinking, man, Jimmy, you gave us 7 things and like all of them are negative. Just people get to Denver and they realize it sucks. No, because they realize they're closer to me and they reach out and they call, text, or email me. It's crazy. And that's the perfect opportunity for you to do that right now. And I'll tell you all the good stuff. I just kept that for off camera, teasing you like. But that number, that email popping up on your screen, just know I'm always the person. Answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Edwards. That was everything people learn after they move to Denver, Colorado in 2022. Until I see you next time,